Due to restructuring, your position is being eliminated, Veronica Sterling announced, not even glancing up from her tablet. Her voice was as cold and sharp as the glass tabletop between us. 19 years with Evergreen Manufacturing, and this was my send-off. A sterile conference room, a condescending executive, and Julian Croft, her enforcer, sitting silently beside her. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 59 years old. Until 10 minutes ago, I was the senior financial controller for a company that once prided itself on quality, on true American craftsmanship. That was before the venture capital vultures like Veronica and Julian got their claws into it. For nearly 2 decades, my life's work was ensuring the numbers always told the truth. Every ledger balanced, every penny accounted for. I even had a small, thriving plant on my desk, a gift from my late wife, Diane, that still reminded me of growth, of quiet care amidst the chaos of corporate life. I'd carefully watered it every morning, a small ritual before diving into the day's figures. "We'll need your keycard and parking pass," Julian added, his tone flat. He slid a small cardboard box across the table. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items." I didn't plead. I didn't argue. I just nodded, a single sharp movement. I stood, straightened my tie, a force of habit, and tucked my worn leather portfolio under my arm. Diane had given it to me for our 15th anniversary. That was before cancer, before the spreadsheets and quarterly reports became my desperate refuge from the silence of an empty house. The security guard, Mark Jensen, looked genuinely embarrassed as he followed me to my office. "Sorry about this, Mr. Vance," he whispered. As I carefully wrapped Diane's framed photo in tissue paper, I noticed a small folded paper crane tucked discreetly into my box. It was from Sarah, a young intern I'd mentored. A silent gesture of support. "Not your doing, Mark," I replied. I placed my keycard on the desk, leaving the plant behind, a symbol of a trust broken, but the leather portfolio stayed firmly under my arm. They thought it just held old papers. They were wrong. Inside, nestled in a hidden pocket, was a flash drive. On it was my real legacy. 3 years of meticulous documentation. My second ledger. Every irregular vendor payment. Every suspicious wire transfer to a shell corporation. Every suddenly canceled audit. Veronica and Julian thought they were just cleaning house, getting rid of the old school accountant who asked too many questions about the new exorbitant consulting fees appearing in departmental budgets. What they didn't know, I'd been recording everything since the day Veronica lost a stack of vendor verification forms, and since Julian started pushing out anyone who questioned their new executive expense policies. I walked through the lobby, past coworkers who suddenly found their shoes fascinating. 19 years of loyalty erased by averted eyes. Only as I reached my car did I allow myself one small, tight smile. They thought I was leaving with nothing. I was leaving with everything. As I pulled into my driveway, the full weight of it hit me. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I had nowhere to be tomorrow morning. No reports to review, no month-end close to prepare for. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at my front door. My house felt different, emptier somehow, though nothing had changed. I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself 2 fingers of the whiskey I kept for special occasions. This qualified, I supposed, though not in the way I'd imagined my career ending. The phone rang. It was my daughter, Chloe. "Dad, Tina from accounting just called me. She said you were let go. What happened?" I gave her the sanitized version. Restructuring. Position eliminated, standard corporate speak. "That's bull," Chloe said, her lawyer instincts flaring. "They can't do that after 19 years without cause. We should file for wrongful termination." "No," I cut her off gently. "No lawsuits. Not for this. Trust me on this, Chloe." I took a slow sip of whiskey. Some battles aren't fought in courtrooms. My voice was firm. After we hung up, I went to my home office and powered up the computer. The flash drive from my portfolio contained everything, organized by date, incident type, and dollar amount. 3 years of financial manipulation, neatly cataloged with supporting evidence. I opened a new document and began typing. Not an angry letter, not a threat, just a clear, factual summary of what I'd observed. Times, dates, amounts. The email addresses at the Securities and Exchange Commission and the State Attorney's Office waited in the recipient field. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really going to do this? These weren't just spreadsheet errors or honest mistakes. This was deliberate financial misconduct. People would lose jobs, maybe face charges. The company Walter built could collapse. I closed the laptop without sending anything. Instead, I found myself pulling out a dusty photo album. Pictures of Walter Albright's retirement party, the old team, Diane standing beside me at the company picnic, both of us younger, unaware of the cancer already growing inside her. "What would you do, Diane?" I whispered to her photograph. I already knew the answer. Diane never tolerated dishonesty. "Do what's right," she would have said. "Everything else is just noise." I slept poorly that night. By morning, something had changed inside me. The fog of shock had cleared, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't about my job anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about Walter's legacy, about the vendors being cheated, about the employees who would eventually pay the price for executive greed. I made coffee in Diane's favorite mug, straightened my tie out of 19 years of habit, and picked up the phone. "Agent Hayes, it's Arthur Vance. I need to talk to you about some financial irregularities at Evergreen Manufacturing. Yes, it's extensive. Can we meet today?" Agent David Hayes of the FBI was all business. 3 days after our initial meeting, I received a certified letter from Evergreen's legal department. The generous severance package required my signature on a confidentiality agreement that would prevent me from discussing any aspect of company operations, past, present, or future. The dollar amount was insultingly low, 3 months' salary for 19 years of service. It wasn't enough to cover Chloe's student loans, let alone my own looming medical bills. I called Chloe for legal advice. "They're worried about something," she said after reviewing the document. "This goes way beyond standard non-disclosure terms. What happens if you don't sign? They're threatening to contest your unemployment benefits and withhold payment for unused vacation time." Her voice hardened. "Legally shaky, but they're betting you won't have the resources to fight it." I thanked her and promised to think it over. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already decided. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. Veronica Sterling stood on my porch, wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Arthur," she said warmly, as if we were old friends. "May I come in?" "I wanted to personally check how you're doing." I let her into my living room but didn't offer refreshments. "The severance paperwork," she said, placing a fresh copy on my coffee table. "There was a misunderstanding. We can offer an additional 2 months if you sign today." "What's the rush?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her smile tightened. "The board is finalizing next quarter's budget. We need to close out all pending financial obligations, like properly paying vendors." A word slipped out before I could stop myself. "Or underpaying them?" Something flickered in her eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean." "The Westbrook invoices?" I said carefully. "The ones that showed up in the system without matching inventory receipts." "Clerical errors," she replied smoothly. "Already addressed." "And the consulting payments to Everett Partners," I pressed. the company that shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Veronica's smile vanished completely. I'd be careful with accusations, Arthur, especially unfounded ones that could be construed as defamatory. Her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. Did you remove any company documents when you left? Because that would constitute theft. I kept copies of my work product as permitted in the employee handbook, I replied truthfully. She stood abruptly. I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider the severance offer. After that, things might become complicated for your retirement planning. After she left, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Back off if you know what's good for you. We know about the flash drive. That evening, I noticed a black sedan, an older model with heavily tinted windows, parked across from my house. It was still there the next morning. By afternoon, my bank called. Someone had attempted to access my accounts using my social security number, but incorrect passwords. When I checked my email, dozens of subscription confirmations for dubious services flooded my inbox, all requiring immediate payment. It was clear they were sending a message. They could make my life difficult. They could destroy my credit. They could watch my house. That night, as I locked up, I found my home office window cracked open just slightly. Nothing was stolen but the small jade plant Diane had given me. The one I had left on my desk at Evergreen was now sitting conspicuously on my home office floor. They had been inside. I called Agent Hayes again. They're pushing back, I told him, hard. Expected, he replied calmly, but concerning. It suggests there's more than just sloppy bookkeeping. Forward me everything, the severance offer, the text, the unauthorized access attempts. Document the surveillance. What about my evidence? Is it enough? His pause told me everything. It's compelling, Arthur, but corporations like Evergreen have battalions of lawyers who will claim these are isolated incidents or accounting errors. We need more, someone on the inside, someone current. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. They were watching me, pressuring me, and I didn't have enough ammunition to fight back. Not yet, anyway. A week after Veronica's visit, I received a call from my old assistant, Brenda Carter. Her voice was hushed, nervous. Can we meet somewhere? Not in public, not at your house. We arranged to meet at my family's old cabin, nestled deep in the Catskills, hours from the city. It would be empty. My brother was in Florida for the winter. Brenda arrived looking exhausted, constantly checking her rear-view mirror as she pulled in. They're doing a full audit, she said without preamble once we were inside. But it's not a real audit. They're changing records, Arthur, backdating approvals, creating paper trails that never existed. I saw Gary Simmons get fired for questioning a fake invoice. They made him look like a thief. How do you know this? They brought in consultants from Julian's old firm. They don't know I can access the system logs. They still have me using your old credentials. She pulled out a flash drive. I've been documenting everything, the before and after. I stared at the tiny device. You're risking your job, Brenda. They're already planning to eliminate my position next month. Her laugh was bitter. Found that out when they accidentally copied me on the restructuring email. What's one more risk? What Brenda showed me went far beyond what I'd suspected. This wasn't just creative accounting or inflated executive perks. Evergreen had been systematically overcharging government contracts, falsifying certification documents for parts that didn't meet safety standards, and recording phantom inventory to inflate company valuation. There's more, Brenda said, pulling up an email chain. They're preparing to sell the manufacturing division to a private equity group. The employees won't know until it's done. The pension fund? My stomach dropped. Her expression confirmed my worst fears. They've been borrowing from it for over a year. If the sale goes through, there won't be enough to cover obligations. Hundreds of families' retirement plans, built over decades, all at risk. Who else knows about this? Just the executive team, and now you, she hesitated. And someone else. My cousin, Ben Carter, from Quality Control. He started asking questions last month. He disappeared a week before you did. Fired? That's the thing, there's no termination paperwork. His employee file shows he resigned, but his badge was never turned in, and his desk was cleared out overnight. His last email to me just said, "Something big is coming down. Don't trust anyone." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Have you heard from him since? His phone goes straight to voicemail. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the sense that we were dealing with something darker than financial fraud. The black sedan was gone from my street when I returned, but somehow that didn't reassure me. I called Ben's number, straight to voicemail. I left a vague message about connecting about professional opportunities. Then I called Agent Hayes again. We need to move faster, I told him, explaining what Brenda had shared. This changes everything, he agreed. The pension fund angle elevates this significantly. I'll speak with my superiors tomorrow, but Arthur, he paused, be careful. If they're manipulating records on this scale, they're desperate. Desperate people make dangerous choices. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ben, about Walter Albright, who'd trusted me to keep his company's finances honest, about the machine operators and warehouse staff who'd put in decades of service counting on pensions that were being drained away. At 2 a.m., my security system alerted me to movement in my backyard. By the time I reached the window, whoever it was had vanished. But my home office window was cracked open, just slightly, but enough to notice. The jade plant, the one from Diane, was gone. They weren't just watching anymore. They were sending another message. Nowhere was safe. I didn't wait for them to make another move. By dawn, I was executing a plan I'd been formulating since Brenda's revelations. First, I moved all my evidence, both my documentation and Brenda's, to 3 separate secure locations. One set went to Chloe with explicit instructions to open only if something happened to me. Another went into a safety deposit box at a bank where Veronica's financial tentacles couldn't reach. The third I encrypted and sent to Agent Hayes with a detailed key delivered separately. Next, I reached out to Gary Simmons from purchasing, who'd been pushed out months before me. We met at a diner 2 towns over. I've been waiting for this call, he said grimly after I explained the situation. I found the same discrepancies, fake invoices for phantom materials. Started asking questions. Next thing I know, I'm being escorted out for violating company policy. Did they threaten you after? Nah, not directly, but my home was broken into a week later. Nothing valuable taken, just my laptop and some files. He leaned forward. I filed a police report, documented everything. Never thought it would be useful, but it establishes a pattern. I finished. Would you be willing to make a statement? He nodded without hesitation. Been feeling like a coward for staying quiet this long. By afternoon, I'd connected with 2 more former employees with similar stories. Each had pieces of the puzzle. Departments where numbers didn't add up. Projects that disappeared from tracking systems. Safety concerns that were buried. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. Arthur? The voice was barely recognizable. It's Ben. My heart pounded. I stepped outside the coffee shop where I'd been working, looking around instinctively. Ben, where are you? Are you okay? Listen carefully. His words were rushed, frightened. The Bentonville contract. Check the testing certification documents against the actual test results. They're putting defective brake systems in military vehicles, Arthur. They're compromising tank integrity. Ben, where are they? They threatened my family, said they'd make sure my kids... His voice broke. I'm leaving town, but someone needs to stop them before soldiers get killed. The line went dead. Military contracts, defective parts. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about lives. I called Agent Hayes immediately, relaying Ben's terrifying information. His response was immediate. This changes everything. I'm bringing in the Department of Defense. Can you come to my office now? 3 hours later, I sat in a conference room with Agent Hayes and 2 stern-faced DOD investigators. I laid out everything: the financial fraud, the document manipulation, the pension fund depletion, and now the military contract corruption. We'll need your full cooperation, one investigator said. This investigation will become very visible very quickly. I understand your safety might be compromised. We can arrange protection. I shook my head. I have a better idea. The next morning, I called Veronica Sterling directly. I've been thinking about that severance package, I said, keeping my voice submissive, defeated. I'd like to discuss terms. Wise decision, she replied, poorly concealing her satisfaction. Come to the office tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll finalize everything. Actually, I countered, I'd prefer somewhere more neutral, the Grand Legacy Hotel. They have private meeting rooms. She hesitated, then agreed. What she didn't know: the Grand Legacy Hotel was already crawling with federal agents, rooms wired for recording, every entrance under surveillance. The trap was set, and Veronica was walking right into it. The Grand Legacy Hotel's Magnolia Room felt unnaturally quiet. Veronica reviewed the paperwork I'd brought. Her attorney sat beside her, occasionally whispering in her ear. This all looks in order, she finally said, sliding the non-disclosure agreement across the table. Just sign here and we can put this unfortunate situation behind us. I looked at the document, 12 pages of legal language designed to silence me forever. Beside it sat the severance check, 5-month salary for 19 years. Before I sign, I said carefully, I'd like to clarify something. This agreement covers all company matters, correct? Including the pension fund irregularities and the Bentonville military contract? The attorney stiffened. Veronica's practiced smile faltered for just a moment, replaced by a flash of unease. All company matters, she confirmed smoothly. Standard language. I nodded, reached for a pen, then paused. One more question. Does this cover my obligation to report federal crimes I've witnessed? What are you implying? The attorney leaned forward, his voice a low growl. I'm not implying anything. I stood slowly, my eyes fixed on Veronica. I'm stating that I've already provided evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment to federal authorities, including our conversation right now. My gaze drifted to a tiny, almost invisible pinhole camera, disguised as a smoke detector on the ceiling. On cue, the conference room door burst open. Agent Hayes walked in, flanked by FBI agents and the DOD investigators. Veronica Sterling, Hayes stated, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. You are under arrest. We have a warrant to search all Evergreen Manufacturing facilities and seize financial records related to government contracts. Her face drained of all color. As Hayes placed a thick folder on the table, its contents visible. This is just a fraction of what we have, he said quietly. The rest is being presented to a grand jury as we speak. Veronica lunged for her phone, but an agent gently intercepted her. Julian Croft and the CEO are being detained for questioning simultaneously, Hayes explained, along with several board members. I didn't stay to watch them lead Veronica away. My part was done. 6 months after the arrests at the Grand Legacy Hotel, I stood in the old Evergreen Manufacturing facility, watching workers on the assembly line. The machines hummed with the same rhythm they had for decades, but everything else had changed. The company had been placed in receivership during the investigation. When the dust settled, a coalition of employees had managed to purchase the manufacturing division with help from a state economic development fund. They'd renamed it Evergreen Legacy Manufacturing. They'd asked me to help set up the new financial systems, proper ones with transparency and accountability built into every level. All done for the day, Mr. Vance. Mark Jensen, the security guard who'd once escorted me out, now nodded respectfully as I signed out at the front desk. Just about, I replied, handing him back my visitor badge. Outside, Chloe waited in her car. How's it looking in there? She asked as I settled into the passenger seat. Good. They've got a solid team. They'll be fine without me checking over their shoulders. I glanced back at the building. I could almost hear Walter Albright's booming laugh. He would be proud. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. The news had covered the story extensively. Executives arrested, charges filed, plea deals negotiated. The pension funds had been partially recovered. Not everything, but enough that most retirees wouldn't lose their homes. Veronica and Julian were awaiting trial. The CEO had turned state's evidence. The story had faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals. Any regrets? Chloe asked as we pulled up to my house. I thought about the question carefully. The jade plant was back on my home office desk, thriving. No, I finally answered. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was right. That evening, I packed away my files on Evergreen. The whole story was documented, preserved, but I no longer needed to carry its weight. Tomorrow, I was starting as a part-time financial ethics consultant for a manufacturing association, helping other companies set up systems that made it harder for the Veronicas and Julians of the world to manipulate the books. Not a bad final chapter for a 59-year-old accountant who, after everything, just wanted the numbers to tell the truth.